Six Mother Bear created weather warning system for forest using animal networks. What this baby witnessed was incredible. The rain started 3 hours before anyone expected it. Ethan Marshall pressed his palm against the cold window of their rented cabin, watching droplets race down the glass while his wife, Lily Morgan, hummed softly to their 3-month-old daughter in the next room. They had come to this remote corner of the forest seeking something they couldn't quite name. Perhaps silence, perhaps distance from the constant hum of their city life, or perhaps just a place where time moved differently. The cabin sat nestled between ancient pines that whispered secrets older than memory, and from the moment they arrived 2 weeks ago, something felt different about this place. Not wrong, just different in a way that made Ethan's skin tingle with anticipation he couldn't explain. The first strange thing happened on their third morning. Ethan was making coffee when he noticed a pattern in the bird calls outside. Not just random chirping, but something that felt deliberate, measured, like Morse code played on nature's instruments. He mentioned it to Lily, who laughed and said he was probably just hearing things differently because of the quiet. But then she started noticing it too, the way squirrels would suddenly stop their frantic gathering and sit perfectly still, all facing the same direction. The way deer would appear at the edge of their property at exactly the same time each evening, not to feed, but seemingly just to stand and observe. And always, always, there was the mother bear. She first appeared on day 5, emerging from the tree line with 2 cubs tumbling behind her. Ethan's first instinct was fear. They had a baby, after all, and bears were dangerous. But something in the bear's movement stopped him from reaching for his phone to call the ranger station. She moved with such deliberate calm, such obvious purpose, that it felt more like watching a neighbor on their morning routine than encountering a wild predator. The bear would sit at a specific spot near the creek that ran behind their cabin, her massive head turning slowly from side to side as if reading invisible signals in the air. Her cubs would play nearby, but she never took her attention away from whatever she was observing. "She's beautiful," Lily had whispered that first time, holding their daughter Emma close to the window. The baby, usually fussy in the late afternoon, had gone completely quiet, her tiny eyes fixed on the bears with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so young. It was as if even Emma understood she was witnessing something special, something that demanded respectful attention rather than fear. Days passed in this strange, peaceful rhythm. Ethan found himself waking earlier each morning, drawn to the window to watch the forest come alive. He started keeping a notebook, jotting down observations that seemed important even though he couldn't say why. The ravens that would gather in groups of exactly 7, the way certain trees would sway even when there was no wind, while others remained perfectly still, the patterns in the moss on the rocks that seemed to shift subtly from day to day. Lily thought he was becoming obsessed, but she said it gently, with a smile that suggested she was falling under the same spell. The mother bear became their daily constant. She would appear at different times, but always with that same purposeful energy. Sometimes she would stand on her hind legs, not in threat but in what looked like careful observation. Other times she would make soft huffing sounds that would immediately trigger responses from other animals, birds taking flight in specific directions, squirrels chattering in what sounded like relay messages through the trees. Ethan started calling her Sentinel, though Lily preferred to simply call her Mother. "Look at how gentle she is with those cubs," Lily said one evening as they watched Mother guide her young ones along the creek. "She's teaching them something, but what?" The cubs would mimic their mother's movements, sitting when she sat, turning their heads when she turned hers. It was training of some kind, but for what purpose neither Ethan nor Lily could guess. Their daughter Emma seemed to have her own connection with the forest rhythm. She would become alert just moments before the animals appeared, her baby sounds taking on different tones that almost seemed to match the patterns they were hearing outside. Ethan knew it sounded crazy. What did a 3-month-old know about forest communications? But he couldn't deny what he was seeing. When Mother Bear was near, Emma was calm. When the birds went silent, Emma would fuss. When the squirrels chattered their urgent messages, Emma would babble back as if trying to participate in the conversation. The notebook filled with observations. Ethan noted that the animals' behavior seemed to intensify before weather changes, but not in the chaotic way he'd always assumed wildlife reacted to storms. This was organized, systematic. 3 days before a thunderstorm that soaked the valley, he watched Mother Bear lead her cubs to higher ground, but not in panic, in careful, measured steps, stopping frequently to ensure other animals were following suit. Deer moved their fawns. Birds relocated their nests. Even the insects seemed to reorganize themselves. "It's like they know," Ethan told Lily one night as they lay in bed, Emma sleeping peacefully between them. "Not just that weather is coming, but exactly what kind, how severe, and where it will hit hardest." Lily traced her finger along Emma's tiny hand and nodded. "Mother Bear isn't just reacting," she said. "She's coordinating, but how and why?" The how started to reveal itself in small ways. Ethan noticed that Mother Bear's huffing sounds had variations. Different lengths, different tones, different intervals. The birds would respond with specific calls depending on which sound she made. The squirrels' chattering would change rhythm to match. It was communication, definitely, but more than that. It was a network, with Mother Bear as some kind of central node, receiving and transmitting information across the forest. One afternoon, a sudden wind picked up, rattling the cabin windows. Ethan watched Mother Bear stand and make a long, low sound he'd never heard before. Immediately, every animal in sight began moving, not fleeing, but repositioning. Birds flew to specific trees. Deer moved to particular clearings. Squirrels disappeared into certain hollows. 20 minutes later, a massive tree fell exactly where a family of deer had been grazing. They were safely clear, watching from their new position as if they'd known exactly what would happen and when. "She saved them," Lily breathed. Emma clutched to her chest. She knew that tree would fall, and she warned them. But Ethan was thinking bigger. "Not just new," he said slowly. "Calculated. Wind speed, tree health, ground saturation from last week's rain. She processed all of that and knew exactly when and where it would fall." It seemed impossible, and yet they'd just watched it happen. The revelation changed how they saw everything. The forest wasn't just alive, it was thinking. Not with a single consciousness, perhaps, but as a collective intelligence with Mother Bear as one of its key processors. Every creature contributed data. Every call and movement shared information. Together, they created a living weather prediction system more accurate than anything humans had developed. Ethan started testing his theory. When Mother Bear made certain sounds, he would note the time and wait. Without fail, weather would change exactly as her signals seemed to predict. A specific chatter from the squirrels meant rain within 6 hours. A particular formation of birds meant wind from the north. The deer clustering in certain areas indicated temperature drops. It was precise, predictable, and absolutely remarkable. But more than the practical applications, what struck both Ethan and Lily was the care in the system. This wasn't just about survival. They watched Mother Bear gently nudge a rabbit's nest to safer ground. They saw her cubs carefully moving turtle eggs away from a flood zone. The network protected everyone, not just the strong or the smart. It was community in its purest form. Emma seemed to understand this better than her parents. When Mother Bear was near, the baby would reach toward the window, not with fear, but with recognition. Once, when Emma was crying inconsolably, Lily carried her to the window just as Mother Bear appeared. The bear looked directly at them, made a soft rumbling sound, and Emma immediately calmed. It was as if the bear had offered comfort across the species divide, mother to mother, understanding the universal language of caring for young. "We're watching something ancient," Lily said one evening as the sun set behind the mountains. "This has been happening for thousands of years, hasn't it? Generations of bears teaching their cubs, generations of forests maintaining this network." Ethan nodded, feeling very small and very privileged. They weren't discovering something new. They were being allowed to witness something that had always been. The Weather Service predicted clear skies for the next week, but Mother Bear's behavior suggested otherwise. She spent 2 days guiding animals to specific locations, her movements more urgent than usual, though never panicked. Squirrels worked overtime storing food in particular trees. Birds reinforced their nests with unusual materials. The deer paths changed, avoiding certain low-lying areas. "Something's coming," Ethan said, watching Mother Bear stand on a ridge, silhouetted against the evening sky. Something big. But instead of fear, he felt a strange confidence. They were part of the network now, even if only as observers. The forest would protect them as it protected all its inhabitants. Lily seemed to feel it too, holding Emma up to see Mother Bear's silhouette. "We're safe here," she whispered, and Emma cooed as if in agreement. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood at the window watching the forest in moonlight, trying to process everything they'd witnessed. The complexity of the communication network, the sophistication of the predictions, the compassion in the warnings. It challenged everything he thought he knew about animal intelligence. But more than that, it made him wonder what else humans had missed in their rush to build their own systems. The morning brought confirmation of Mother Bear's warnings. The Weather Service issued a sudden update. An unexpected storm system had formed and was heading their way. But by then, the forest was already prepared. Every creature was exactly where it needed to be. The network had known for days what satellites had only just detected. As the first drops began to fall, heavier than any rain they'd experienced since arriving, Ethan watched Mother Bear settle into a protected grove with her cubs. She looked toward their cabin once, a long, steady gaze that felt like reassurance. Then she turned her attention to the storm, ready to guide her forest through whatever came next. The rain intensified through the day, but inside the cabin they felt cocooned in safety. Emma slept peacefully, occasionally making small sounds that seemed to echo the rain's rhythm. Lily worked on a painting she'd started of Mother Bear, trying to capture not just the bear's physical presence, but the intelligence in her eyes. Ethan continued filling his notebook, documenting not just observations now, but questions, theories, wonder. "What if they know we're watching?" Lily asked suddenly. "What if Mother Bear has been teaching us too, the way she teaches her cubs?" The thought hung in the air between them. It would explain the direct gazes, the proximity to their cabin, the way the bear's demonstrations seemed almost deliberately visible from their windows. "Maybe," Ethan said slowly, "we're not just observers. Maybe we're students." The storm continued to build, but there was no fear in the cabin. They had seen the network in action, witnessed its accuracy and compassion. They trusted Mother Bear's judgment more than any weather report. When Emma woke, Lily fed her by the window, watching the rain create rivers down the glass while telling her daughter about the brave, smart bear who protected the forest. Evening came early under the storm clouds. but the forest remained visible in flashes of lightning. Each illumination revealed animals exactly where Mother Bear had positioned them, safe, protected, waiting. The network held strong against the storm, a living testament to the power of communication and community. Ethan realized he was witnessing something that no scientific journal would ever publish, something that would sound like fantasy if he tried to explain it. But it was real as his daughter's breathing, as real as his wife's hand in his. "We can't leave," Lily said quietly as they prepared for bed. "Not yet. We're just beginning to understand." Ethan knew she was right. They had come seeking quiet and found instead a symphony. They had come for isolation and discovered a community more connected than any they'd known. They had come to escape and instead found themselves drawn deeper into something magnificent. The storm raged through the night, but in the cabin they slept peacefully. Emma didn't cry once, seeming to understand that the sounds outside were not threats, but the forest's voice raised in necessity. When morning came, it would reveal the network's success, every creature accounted for, every family safe. But for now they rested, held in the embrace of something larger than themselves. Mother Bear had shown them that the forest wasn't just surviving. It was thinking, planning, caring. The weather warning system was just one facet of something much deeper, a collective consciousness that valued every life within its reach. As sleep finally took him, Ethan's last thought was a question. If animals could create such a system of mutual care and protection, what did that say about the human world's failures to do the same? The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed exactly as Mother Bear's network had predicted. Ethan woke to find Lily already at the window with Emma, watching the forest recover. Animals emerged from their shelters, checking on neighbors, sharing food that had been protected from the storm. Mother Bear was there too, her cubs playing in puddles while she surveyed the minimal damage with what Ethan could only describe as satisfaction. "Look," Lily pointed to where several deer were helping to clear debris from a rabbit warren. "They're helping each other rebuild." It was true. The same network that had warned of danger was now coordinating recovery. Birds carried nesting materials to those whose homes had been damaged. Squirrels shared cached food with those whose stores had been flooded. And Mother Bear, the grand coordinator, moved through it all with her cubs, checking, assessing, organizing. Emma reached toward the window, making a sound that was almost like the soft huffing Mother Bear used for her gentlest communications. "She's learning their language," Lily laughed. But Ethan wondered if it wasn't more accurate to say she had never forgotten it. Perhaps all humans were born knowing this ancient communication, and it was only the noise of civilization that made them forget. Days passed in this new understanding. They stopped seeing the forest as scenery and started seeing it as a society. Every movement had meaning. Every sound carried information. The network never stopped, constantly adjusting, predicting, protecting. Mother Bear remained the most visible coordinator, but Ethan began to recognize other nodes: an ancient raven who seemed to specialize in wind patterns, a deer matriarch who knew every safe path through the valley. "We should document this," Ethan said one evening. But even as he spoke, he knew the impossibility of it. How could he explain that a bear had created a weather prediction system? How could he prove that animals were communicating complex meteorological data? Who would believe that the forest had achieved something human technology struggled to match? "No," Lily said firmly, "this isn't for documentation. This is for witnessing. Some things are meant to be experienced, not explained." She was right, of course. The magic of what they were seeing would be diminished by attempts to scientize it. This was bigger than data, older than study, This was life recognizing life. Consciousness acknowledging consciousness across the boundaries humans had invented. They were privileged to witness it, but it wasn't theirs to claim or expose. Another storm system appeared on the weather radar, this one larger than the last. The forecast called for possible flooding in the valley. But 2 days before the meteorologists made their predictions, Mother Bear was already at work. This time, Ethan and Lily could read the signals better. The long, low call meant major water event. The repeated short huffs indicated timeline, 2 days. The direction she faced while calling showed where the water would flow. They watched in amazement as the forest reorganized itself completely. Animals didn't just move to safety, they moved strategically. Beavers reinforced dams in specific locations to redirect water flow. Birds relocated not just their own nests, but also helped move eggs from ground-nesting species. Mother Bear personally escorted a family of foxes with young kits to higher ground, her massive presence ensuring no predator would take advantage of their vulnerability during relocation. "She's not just predicting weather," Ethan said with sudden clarity. "She's managing disasters. The whole network is." It was emergency management on a scale, and with an efficiency that put human efforts to shame. No creature was left behind. No area was overlooked. The forest moved as one organism, protecting all its parts. The night before the storm was predicted to hit, something extraordinary happened. Mother Bear approached their cabin closer than ever before, her cubs staying back at the tree line. She stood on her hind legs and looked directly through their window at Emma, who was awake in Lily's arms. For a long moment, Bear and baby regarded each other. Then Mother Bear made a new sound, one they'd never heard, soft, almost musical, clearly directed at them. "She's telling us we're safe," Lily whispered, tears in her eyes. "She's including us in the network's protection." Emma responded with her own soft sound, and Mother Bear nodded, before dropping to all fours and returning to her cubs. The message was clear. The cabin was in a safe zone. The network had accounted for them in its calculations. That night, as the storm approached, they felt no fear. They had been accepted into something ancient and wise. The forest's network had expanded to include them, not as controllers or even full participants, but as recognized residents worthy of protection. Emma slept soundly, seeming to understand at some deep level that Mother Bear was watching over them all. The storm arrived exactly when the network had predicted, down to the hour. From their windows, they watched water flow exactly where Mother Bear had indicated it would. Every animal was exactly where it needed to be. The beaver's dam modifications channeled floodwaters away from vulnerable areas. It was choreographed survival, conducted by an intelligence distributed across thousands of creatures but unified in purpose. "No one would believe this," Ethan said, as they watched the forest manage the flood with incredible precision. "They'd say we're anthropomorphizing, projecting intelligence where there's only instinct." Lily shifted Emma to her other arm and shook her head. "Then they're the ones who are blind. This isn't projection. This is recognition. We're seeing what was always there, what we just refused to acknowledge because it would mean admitting we're not the only intelligent species on Earth." The storm passed, as all storms do, but the network's achievement remained. Not a single creature lost despite flooding that the news called unprecedented and devastating in nearby areas. Their valley, protected by Mother Bear's network, showed minimal damage. The forest had not just survived, but thrived, its community bonds strengthened by shared success. In the days that followed, they noticed changes in how the animals treated them. Birds would land closer to the cabin. Deer would graze in view of their windows without fear, and Mother Bear would sometimes sit where they could see her, just existing in shared space. No longer teacher and students, but neighbors in the deepest sense of the word. "We can't leave," Lily said one evening as they watched Mother Bear teaching her cubs to fish in the creek. "Not just yet. Emma needs to see more of this. She needs to grow up knowing that this exists." Ethan agreed. Their daughter was being given a gift, the chance to know from the beginning that intelligence and compassion existed in forms beyond human. She would grow up bilingual in a way, fluent in both human language and the older tongue of the forest. As the weeks passed, their understanding deepened. They learned to recognize different types of warnings, not just for weather, but for other dangers. A particular bird call meant humans approaching on the hiking trail. A specific squirrel chatter indicated predators passing through. The network tracked everything, shared everything, protected everyone. It was surveillance and communication and emergency management all in one, run entirely by consensus and compassion. Mother Bear's cubs were growing, learning their role in the network. The little female was particularly attentive, already mimicking her mother's warning calls with surprising accuracy. The male was more interested in the physical aspects, learning to read wind patterns in the movement of leaves, to sense pressure changes that preceded storms. Both would eventually take their place in the network, adding their own observations and insights to the collective intelligence. "What happens when she's gone?" Lily asked one day, voicing a fear Ethan had been harboring. "When Mother Bear is no longer here to coordinate?" But even as she asked, they both knew the answer. The network was bigger than any individual. Mother Bear was teaching her cubs, but she was also teaching the entire forest. Every creature that participated learned the patterns, understood the signals. When she was gone, others would step into her role, perhaps not as dramatically, but just as effectively. One afternoon, Emma made a sound that stopped both her parents cold. It was almost exactly the soft huff Mother Bear used for "all clear" after danger passed. They looked at their daughter, then at each other, wondering if they were imagining things. But then Emma did it again, and outside, a squirrel responded with the appropriate chatter. Their 3-month-old daughter had just successfully communicated with the forest network. "She's one of them," Lily said in wonder. "She's growing up as part of this." It was true. Emma would never see the separation between human and nature that defined most people's worldview. For her, the forest's intelligence would be as real and obvious as her parents' love. She would know from the beginning what Ethan and Lily were only just discovering. The consciousness took many forms, and all of them deserved respect. The notebook Ethan had been keeping was now full, but he'd stopped writing observations and started writing questions. How did the network begin? How far did it extend? Did other forests have similar systems? Were there other mother bears in other valleys, or was she unique? Each question led to 10 more, a fractal pattern of wonder that seemed to have no end. But perhaps the biggest question was what this meant for humanity. If animals could create such sophisticated systems of communication and mutual aid, what did that say about human assumptions of superiority? If a bear could predict weather better than satellites, if a forest could manage disasters better than governments, then perhaps humans needed to fundamentally reconsider their relationship with the natural world. These thoughts occupied Ethan as he watched Mother Bear one evening, sitting in her usual spot by the creek. The sun was setting, painting the forest gold, and she seemed to be simply enjoying the moment. No warnings to give, no disasters to manage, just a bear being present in her world. Her cubs played nearby, and occasionally she would huff softly at them. Not warnings, but just mother sounds, the universal language of love and care. "She's happy," Lily said, joining him at the window with Emma. "Look at her. She's just happy." It was true. For all her responsibilities as a network node, for all her intelligence and capability, Mother Bear was still simply a bear who loved her cubs and her forest. The complexity of her thoughts didn't diminish the simplicity of her joys. If anything, it enhanced them. As darkness fell, they prepared Emma for bed, but she was fussy, unable to settle. On instinct, Lily carried her to the window. Mother Bear was still there, a shadow in the darkness, but when Emma made a small sound, the bear turned toward them. Even in the dark, they could feel her attention. She made a soft, rhythmic sound, almost like a lullaby, and Emma immediately calmed, her tiny body relaxing into sleep. "She sang our baby to sleep," Lily whispered, tears on her cheeks. "A bear just sang our human baby to sleep." Ethan wrapped his arms around his family, feeling the weight of the moment. They were no longer observers of the network. They were part of it, woven into its fabric of mutual care and protection. The forest had adopted them, and Mother Bear had become, in some impossible way, Emma's guardian too. That night, Ethan dreamed of the network extending beyond the forest, connecting all wild places in a web of communication and care. He saw mother bears in every valley, teaching their cubs and their forests. He saw the earth itself as conscious, thinking through the collective intelligence of all its creatures. When he woke, the dream felt less like fantasy and more like a glimpse of something real but hidden. The morning brought fog, thick and mysterious, but the forest was calm. The network had predicted this too, and all the animals were prepared. Through the mist, they could barely make out Mother Bear's shape, but they knew she was there, watching, protecting, coordinating. She had become their constant, their comfort, their connection to something larger than themselves. "I want to paint her," Lily said suddenly. "Not just her physical form, but all of this, the intelligence, the compassion, the network. I want to capture what she really is." Ethan encouraged her, knowing that art might convey what science couldn't. Maybe Lily's paintings could help others see what they had been privileged to witness. As Lily sketched Emma in her bouncer nearby, Ethan watched the forest through the fog. Even obscured, he could sense the network functioning. Birds calling through the mist, their sounds precisely timed to penetrate the fog's dampening effect. Squirrels using different trees as foghorns, their positioning allowing sound to carry further. And somewhere in that white blindness, Mother Bear coordinated it all, ensuring no one became lost or vulnerable in the reduced visibility. The fog lifted gradually, revealing the forest unchanged, but somehow different to Ethan's eyes. He was seeing it now as Mother Bear might see it. Not as landscape, but as community. Not as resources, but as relatives. Every tree was a communication tower. Every stream an information highway. The forest was technology. But technology so advanced and integrated that humans had mistaken it for simplicity. Days blended into weeks, and their understanding continued to deepen. They learned that the network had different modes: normal operations, storm preparation, predator alerts, and something else, something they couldn't quite categorize. Sometimes Mother Bear and other animals would engage in behaviors that seemed purely social, purely for joy. Groups gathering with no apparent survival purpose, sounds made that conveyed no warnings or instructions, just expression. "They're talking," Lily said one day, watching a gathering of various species by the creek. Not communicating survival information, but just talking, sharing, being together. It was another layer of the network, not just functional, but social, emotional, perhaps even spiritual in some way beyond human understanding. Emma was growing, becoming more alert, more responsive to the forest's rhythms. She would turn her head when certain birds called, as if understanding their messages. She would calm when Mother Bear was near, even if she couldn't see her. She was learning the forest's language before she learned human speech, and Ethan wondered what kind of person that would make her. One evening, as they sat outside the cabin for the first time since arriving, Mother Bear approached closer than ever before. Her cubs had grown considerably, nearly half her size now, but they hung back as she came forward. She stopped just 10 feet from where they sat, Emma in Lily's lap, and for a long moment they all just existed together in the space between wild and domestic, between human and animal. Then Mother Bear did something extraordinary. She lay down, right there in front of them, and rolled on her back like a dog wanting belly rubs. Her cubs, seeing their mother's relaxation, came forward too, playing and tumbling in the grass. It was an invitation, a statement of trust so profound that Lily started crying. They didn't move, didn't try to touch or approach, but just sat in that sacred space of mutual acceptance. "She's showing us we're family," Ethan said quietly. "In her world, in the network's understanding, we belong here now." Emma made her soft huffing sound, the one that was becoming her signature contribution to the forest's language, and Mother Bear huffed back. A conversation between species, between generations, between different forms of consciousness recognizing each other. As the sun set, Mother Bear rose and led her cubs back into the forest, but not before turning for one last look. In her eyes, Ethan saw intelligence that matched any human's, but also something more, a wisdom that came from being part of something larger than individual consciousness. She was bear, but she was also forest, also network, also Earth itself thinking through one of its many minds. That night, as they put Emma to bed, she fussed until they opened her window slightly. The sounds of the forest night drifted in, owls contributing their data about nocturnal movements, insects reporting on humidity and temperature, night mammals adding their observations to the constant stream of information. Emma settled immediately, soothed by the network's night shift. "She'll never be alone," Lily said, watching their daughter sleep. "Even when we're gone, she'll have this. The network will remember her, include her, protect her." It was a comfort beyond words, knowing that their daughter was held by something so much larger and older than human civilization. Ethan stood at the window long after Lily had gone to bed, watching the forest in moonlight and thinking about everything they'd witnessed. The weather warning system was just the beginning, the most visible aspect of something far more profound. They had discovered not just animal intelligence, but animal wisdom. Not just communication, but community in its truest form. Tomorrow would bring new observations, new understanding. Mother Bear would continue her work, teaching her cubs in the forest, coordinating the network that had functioned for generations before humans arrived and would function long after they left. But tonight, Ethan simply stood and witnessed, feeling grateful beyond measure for being allowed to see behind the veil that separated human perception from the truth of the living world. The forest breathed around him, thousands of consciousness working as one, and somewhere in that breathing was his daughter's small contribution, already part of something eternal. They had come seeking silence and found instead the most important conversation on Earth, the one that had been happening all along, waiting for humans to finally stop talking long enough to hear it. The morning after the storm revealed something that changed everything. Ethan woke early, unable to shake a feeling that something was different. The forest was quiet, but not the empty quiet of absence. It was the full quiet of anticipation, like the moment before a symphony begins. He made coffee and stood at the window, watching the sun slowly illuminate the valley. That's when he saw them. Not just Mother Bear and her cubs, but dozens of animals, all moving with unmistakable purpose toward the meadow below their cabin. Deer walked alongside foxes. Rabbits hopped between the legs of a moose. Birds of every species filled the trees surrounding the clearing, and at the center of it all, Mother Bear sat with a patience that seemed almost ceremonial. "Ah, Lily," Ethan whispered, not wanting to break whatever spell was being woven. "You need to see this." She came to the window carrying Emma, who was unusually alert for so early in the morning. The baby's eyes immediately fixed on the gathering below, and she made a soft sound that Ethan had never heard before, something between a sigh and a hum. Outside, several animals turned toward their cabin, as if they had heard Emma's sound through the walls and windows. "They're waiting for something," Lily said, her voice filled with wonder. "This isn't random, this is planned." What happened next would stay with them forever. Mother Bear stood and made a series of calls that were completely different from her weather warnings. These sounds were longer, more melodic, almost like questions being posed to the assembly, and incredibly, different animals responded in sequence. The old raven they'd noticed before flew to a low branch and made a complex series of sounds. A deer matriarch stamped her hooves in a specific pattern. Even the small creatures, squirrels, rabbits, mice, added their voices to what was becoming clear as some kind of discussion. "They're not just communicating," Ethan said, his scientific mind racing to process what he was seeing. "They're deliberating. This is a council meeting." It seemed impossible, the stuff of fairy tales, but the evidence was right before their eyes. The animals were taking turns, each species contributing something to what appeared to be a collective decision-making process. And Mother Bear, their sentinel, was facilitating it all with a sophistication that made human town halls look chaotic by comparison. The discussion went on for nearly an hour. Sometimes the exchanges became rapid, almost heated, with chattering and calling overlapping. Other times there would be long pauses where every creature seemed to be considering what had been shared. Mother Bear would occasionally make soft huffing sounds that seemed to refocus the group, bringing them back to whatever central question was being discussed. Her cubs watched intently, learning not just the language, but the process, the democracy of the wild. Then something extraordinary happened. A young fox, barely out of kithood, limped into the clearing. Its left front paw was clearly injured, probably caught in something human-made, judging by the way the wound looked. The fox made a series of yips that sounded almost like pleading. The assembly went silent. Mother Bear approached the injured fox slowly, sniffed the wound, then turned back to the group and made a long, low sound. What followed was nothing short of miraculous. Different animals began bringing things. A crow flew off and returned with specific leaves in its beak. Squirrels brought certain types of moss. The deer matriarch used her hooves to dig up particular roots. Each contribution was placed near the injured fox. Then Mother Bear did something that defied every nature documentary Ethan had ever watched. She began to gently apply the gathered materials to the fox's wound, using her massive paws with a delicacy that seemed impossible. She was creating a poultice, a natural bandage from the materials the community had provided. "She's a healer," Lily breathed, tears streaming down her face. "She's their doctor." Emma made her soft huffing sound again, and this time Mother Bear looked directly at their window and huffed back, as if acknowledging that yes, they were witnessing something sacred. The fox's treatment continued, with other animals helping to secure the bandage using twisted grass and their own saliva as adhesive. It was medical care, primitive perhaps by human standards, but effective and, more importantly, communal. The fox, once treated, made a series of grateful sounds to the assembly, then limped to a sunny spot to rest. But the council wasn't finished. The discussion resumed, and now Ethan thought he could guess the topic. They were discussing the source of the fox's injury. Several animals made angry sounds while looking toward the hiking trail. Others seemed to be arguing for caution. Mother Bear listened to it all, occasionally adding her own voice, but mostly facilitating others' contributions. After another hour, some kind of consensus seemed to be reached. Animals began dispersing, but not randomly. Groups formed and headed in specific directions, some toward the hiking trail, others deeper into the forest, still others toward the creek. Mother Bear and her cubs remained in the meadow with the injured fox and a few other animals. It was clear that whatever decision had been made, implementation was now beginning. Over the following days, Ethan and Lily watched the forest's response to what they learned was a human-set illegal trap that had injured the fox. The network didn't seek revenge, as humans might. Instead, they systematically located and exposed every trap in the valley. Birds would mark them with droppings. Larger animals would trigger them safely with thrown branches. The network was protecting itself, but doing so in a way that harmed no one, not even the trap setter. "They're better than us," Lily said one evening, as they watched Mother Bear teaching her cubs to identify the smell of metal traps. "We would want punishment, justice. They just want safety." Ethan nodded, humbled by the wisdom of creatures humans had long considered inferior. The network's response was purely practical, focused on prevention rather than retribution. It was a level of emotional maturity that many humans never achieved. Emma was changing too, becoming more attuned to the forest's rhythms with each passing day. She would wake before storms, not crying but alert, making her soft sounds toward the window. She seemed to know when Mother Bear was near even before she came into view. Most remarkably, she had begun making different sounds for different animals. A specific coo for the birds, a different hum for the squirrels, and always that special huff for Mother Bear. "She's multilingual," Ethan joked, but it wasn't really a joke. Emma was learning to communicate across species barriers before she could even speak her native human language. What would that mean for her future? What kind of person would she become, raised with the knowledge that humans were not the only intelligent life on Earth? One morning brought an answer of sorts. Mother Bear appeared at their cabin with something in her mouth, a piece of paper. She dropped it on their doorstep and huffed that specific sound she used for important communications. When Ethan retrieved the paper, he found it was a notice from the Forest Service about reported illegal trapping in the area. Someone had found the exposed traps and reported them. The network's strategy had worked. "She understands," Lily said in amazement. "She knows what that paper means. She knows we can read it." The implications were staggering. Mother Bear not only understood that humans communicated through marks on paper, but she understood the concept well enough to know this particular paper was relevant to recent events. Her intelligence wasn't just animal intelligence. It was intelligence, period, capable of understanding abstract concepts across species lines. That afternoon, they witnessed something new. Mother Bear's cubs were practicing weather calls, but they were getting them wrong. The female cub made a sound that should indicate rain from the south, but she was facing north. Mother Bear corrected her gently, demonstrating the proper positioning. The male cub tried to indicate wind speed, but his huffing intervals were off. Again, Mother Bear showed him the correct pattern. It was a classroom, outdoor and interspecies, but unmistakably educational. "They have curriculum," Ethan said, his notebook abandoned as he simply watched in awe. "Standardized knowledge passed down through generations. This is culture, Lily. They have culture. She nodded, holding Emma up to better see the lesson below. Their daughter watched with the focused attention of a student, occasionally making small sounds that seemed like attempts to participate in the lesson. The teaching session expanded. Other animals began participating, with adult squirrels demonstrating their part of the communication network to younger ones. Birds showed fledglings how to position themselves for optimal sound transmission. The deer matriarch taught her fawns to read wind patterns in grass movement. It was forest school, with multiple teachers and an integrated curriculum that spanned species. As the days passed, they noticed the injured fox recovering remarkably well. The forest's medicine had worked, but more than that, the community continued to support the fox during recovery. Different animals brought food. Others would groom the fox when it couldn't reach certain spots due to the injury. The network wasn't just about survival. It was about quality of life, about ensuring every member thrived, not just survived. "No one gets left behind," Lily said, watching a rabbit share its foraged greens with the recovering fox. "That's their rule. No one gets left behind." It was so different from the human world they'd left, where competition and individual success were valued over cooperation and community care. Here, success was measured not by individual achievement but by collective well-being. One evening, a new crisis tested the network. A small wildfire had started several valleys over. They could smell the smoke and see the orange glow on the horizon. The Forest Service helicopters were already responding, but the network had its own protocols. Mother Bear stood on the ridge making long, carrying calls that Ethan now recognized as long-distance communication. She was exchanging information with other network nodes, other valleys coordinators. The response was swift and organized. Birds began flying in from the direction of the fire, reporting on its movement and intensity. The information was processed and shared. Animals in the path of potential spread began relocating, but not in panic. They moved deliberately to predetermined safe zones, areas the network had long ago identified as fire refuges. Mother Bear coordinated the evacuation of their valley's vulnerable members, just in case. "They've done this before," Ethan said, watching the smooth efficiency of the evacuation. "Generations of them. They have institutional memory of fire management." The network's response made human evacuation procedures look haphazard. Every creature knew exactly where to go, when to move, and who to help. Elder animals guided the young. Strong helped weak. Predator and prey moved together, their usual relationship suspended in the face of shared threat. The fire was contained before it reached their valley, but the network remained vigilant for days afterward. Scouts were posted. Information continued flowing. Mother Bear held what appeared to be debriefing sessions, where animals shared what had worked and what could be improved. They were learning, adapting, improving their already impressive system. During this time, something beautiful happened. The recovering fox, now fully healed, began participating in the network's operations. Despite being young and previously untrained, the fox had learned from observation and was now contributing its own observations and warnings. The network had not just healed the fox's body, but had integrated it fully into the community. The fox had gone from patient to participant, from rescued to rescuer. Emma seemed to understand the significance. When the fox appeared near their cabin, she would make a special sound, not one they'd heard before, but something that seemed to mean recognition, or perhaps gratitude. The fox would often look toward her and make a soft yip in response. They were friends, or whatever the cross-species equivalent of friendship was. "She'll never be lonely," Lily said one night as they watched Emma sleep. "She has an entire forest of friends." It was true. Their daughter was growing up not just with human parents, but with an extended family that included bears, foxes, birds, and every other creature in the valley. She would never feel the isolation that so many humans experienced. She would always know she was part of something larger. The weather patterns were changing as autumn approached. The network's activity shifted accordingly. Food storage became a priority. Migration patterns were discussed and coordinated. Mother Bear's teachings to her cubs intensified, covering winter-specific survival strategies. The forest was preparing for seasonal change with the same systematic approach it applied to storms and fires. Ethan noticed that Mother Bear was gaining weight rapidly, preparing for winter hibernation. Her cubs were too, though they seemed more interested in playing in the falling leaves than in serious preparation. But even their play was educational. They were learning to move quietly through dried leaves, to find food under forest debris, to read the signs of coming winter in tree bark and animal behavior. Will the network continue through winter? Lily wondered aloud one day. When Mother Bear hibernates, who coordinates? They got their answer soon enough. As Mother Bear prepared for hibernation, they watched her formally hand off responsibilities to other animals. The old raven took on weather monitoring duties. The deer matriarch assumed coordination of ground movement. Different species stepped up to fill different roles. The network was designed to function regardless of individual availability. One of the most touching moments came when Mother Bear brought her cubs to the cabin one last time before hibernation. She stood them in front of the window, where Emma could see them clearly, then made a series of sounds that felt like introductions. She was presenting her cubs to Emma, formally acknowledging the human baby as part of the forest community. Emma responded with her huffing sound, and the cubs huffed back. It was a promise, a connection that would outlast winter. "They'll remember her," Lily said through tears. "When they wake in spring, they'll remember our daughter." The cubs would return as yearlings, possibly with cubs of their own eventually. And Emma would be here, growing alongside them, part of their world in a way no human had been before. As the first snow began to fall, the network shifted into winter mode. Communications became less frequent but more precise. Energy was conserved. The animals had shown Ethan and Lily that winter wasn't a time of mere survival, but of strategic patience. Every action was calculated for maximum benefit with minimum energy expenditure. It was sustainability in its purest form. The network's winter wisdom extended beyond just animal behavior. They had observed how certain trees were protected, while others were used for shelter or food. How water sources were kept accessible through strategic movement that prevented complete freezing. How food caches were distributed to ensure no area was left without emergency supplies. It was landscape management on a scale, and with a sophistication that human forestry was only beginning to understand. Mother Bear's last act before hibernation was remarkable. She led her cubs to their den, but first stopped at a specific tree. She reached up and made marks on the bark with her claws. Not random scratches, but deliberate patterns. Other bears had marked the same tree over the years, Ethan realized. It was a message board, a way of leaving information for the next generation or for bears passing through. The marks seemed to indicate the den's location, the quality of the year's food supply, perhaps even the number of cubs. "Written language," Ethan said quietly. "They have written language." It was primitive, yes, but it was undeniably symbolic communication through permanent marks. The implications for animal cognition studies were revolutionary, but more than that, it was poetry. The bears were writing their stories on the trees, leaving their history in the bark for others to read. Emma watched Mother Bear's family disappear into their den with an expression of such understanding that it took Ethan's breath away. His 5-month-old daughter understood that her friends were going to sleep for the winter, that they would return, that this was natural and right. She didn't cry or fuss. She simply huffed once, softly, a goodbye that somehow carried the promise of spring reunion. The network continued through winter, quieter but no less remarkable. The ravens coordinated snow warnings, deer managed trail breaking. Smaller animals maintained tunnel systems under the snow that served as highways for multiple species. Even in the depths of winter, the forest thought and planned and protected. They spent the winter months processing everything they had witnessed. Lily painted, creating a visual record of the network's complexity. Ethan wrote, trying to capture in words what seemed beyond language. And Emma grew, her understanding of the forest's language developing alongside her human speech. Her first word wasn't mama or dada, but a sound that meant bear in the forest's tongue. Spring's arrival was announced by the network long before human calendars suggested it. Birds began returning with information from southern wintering grounds. Hibernating animals started stirring based on signals Ethan couldn't detect, but the network clearly communicated. And then, one morning that felt like miracle and homecoming combined, Mother Bear emerged with her cubs. They were larger, stronger, bearing the confidence of survivors. But when they saw Emma at the window, now able to stand while holding onto the sill, they immediately came closer. The cubs huffed in greeting, and Emma huffed back, her sound more refined now, more accurate. Mother Bear watched this exchange with what could only be described as approval. The reunion marked a new phase in their relationship with the network. They were no longer observers or even participants. They were members, full members, of the forest community. The network had evolved to include them, and they had evolved to understand it. Emma would grow up bilingual in the truest sense, speaking both human and forest with equal fluency. As Ethan watched Mother Bear resume her coordination duties, he realized that they had witnessed something that challenged everything humans believed about intelligence, consciousness, and community. The weather warning system that had first caught their attention was just the tip of an iceberg of interspecies cooperation that had existed for millennia. They had been allowed to see behind the veil that separated human perception from the reality of the natural world. But more than scientific revolution, they had experienced a spiritual one. They had learned that humans were not alone in their capacity for thought, planning, and compassion. They had discovered that the earth itself was conscious, thinking through countless minds, all connected in networks of mutual aid and shared wisdom. They had found that their daughter could grow up truly connected, never alone, always held by something larger than human society could offer. The forest had taught them that intelligence wasn't about dominance but about integration, that wisdom wasn't about knowing more, but about sharing better, that survival wasn't about competition, but about cooperation so deep it transcended species boundaries. Mother Bear had shown them that the Earth had been running successful civilizations long before humans appeared and would continue long after. As spring deepened into summer, they made a decision. They would stay, not just for another season, but permanently. This wasn't just a place to live, it was a community that had accepted them, educated them, and included their daughter as one of its own. They would raise Emma here, in the network, letting her grow up knowing what they had only recently discovered, that humanity's greatest achievement might not be what it could build alone, but what it could learn from what was already built. The cabin that had been a temporary escape became a permanent home. But more than that, the forest became their true home, and the network their extended family. They had come seeking silence and found a symphony. They had come fleeing complexity and discovered that true complexity, the kind that worked, was based on simple principles of mutual care and shared wisdom. Mother Bear continued her work, now teaching not just her own cubs, but in a way teaching Emma too. The human child would grow up understanding the forest's language, contributing to its network, protected by its collective wisdom. She would know from her earliest memories that bears could predict weather, that forests could think, that animals had culture and medicine and democracy. One evening, as they sat outside the cabin watching the network's evening shift change, nocturnal animals taking over monitoring duties from diurnal ones, Lily asked a question that had been growing in her mind. What if Emma teaches others? What if she helps other humans understand what we've discovered here? Ethan considered this. Their daughter, raised between worlds, could indeed become a bridge. Not to expose or exploit the network, but to help humanity understand its place within the larger intelligence of Earth. Emma toddled over to where they sat, her movement still unsteady but determined. She pointed at Mother Bear in the distance and made a perfect huffing sound, then looked at her parents and said in clear human speech, "Friend." It was a declaration that transcended language, a statement of belonging that no amount of scientific documentation could capture. Their daughter was truly bilingual, and her first translation was the only word that mattered. The network had evolved to include them, 3 humans in a vast web of non-human intelligence. But more importantly, they had evolved to deserve inclusion. They had learned to listen more than speak, to observe more than interfere, to appreciate more than analyze. They had discovered that the highest human achievement might be to recognize that humans weren't the only achievers. As darkness fell, the forest's night shift took over seamlessly. Owls began their surveys. Bats started their insect population monitoring. Nocturnal mammals emerged to tend their part of the network. And in the cabin, Emma fell asleep to the sound of the forest thinking, her breathing synchronized with the larger breathing of the ecosystem she was part of. Mother Bear made one last round before settling for the night, checking on various network nodes, ensuring all was well. She paused near their cabin, visible in the moonlight, and looked toward them. It wasn't a look of curiosity anymore, or even of teaching. It was simply acknowledgement. One consciousness recognizing another. One mother acknowledging another, one network node confirming connection with another. The weather warning system that had first amazed them continued to function, predicting storms with uncanny accuracy. But they now understood it was just one application of something far grander. A planetary intelligence that had been functioning long before humans evolved and would continue long after. They were privileged to witness it, blessed to be included in it, and humbled to realize that human intelligence was just one voice in a much larger conversation. Tomorrow, Mother Bear would continue her work. The network would process new information, make new decisions, care for new injuries, and prepare for new challenges. Emma would wake and contribute her small voice to the forest's language. And Ethan and Lily would continue learning that the greatest human wisdom might be the recognition that humans had never been alone in their capacity to think, feel, and care. The forest breathed around them, thousands of minds working as one, and they were part of that breathing now. They had sought escape and found belonging. They had sought quiet and found the most important conversation on Earth. They had sought simplicity and found complexity so beautiful it could only be called sacred. In the distance, a wolf howled, not part of their immediate network but connected to it through chains of communication that spanned continents. The howl was answered by another, then another. Information flowing across impossible distances through voices evolved for exactly this purpose. The Earth was thinking, had always been thinking, through every creature that called it home. Emma stirred in her sleep and made a soft huffing sound. Somewhere in the forest, Mother Bear huffed back, so quietly it might have been imagination, except that Emma smiled in her sleep. They were connected now, human child and bear mother, part of something that transcended species and spoke to the deeper unity of all life. The network would continue through the night, through the seasons, through the years. Emma would grow up within it, speaking its language, understanding its wisdom. She would know truths that most humans had forgotten, that intelligence took many forms, that communication transcended words, that community included all conscious beings regardless of species, and perhaps, through her, humanity might remember what it had long forgotten, that we were never meant to be separate from nature, but part of it, not masters but participants, not the only intelligence but one of many in the beautiful, complex, eternal conversation of life on Earth. The forest had taught them this, Mother Bear had shown them this, and Emma would live this truth with every breath, every word, every connection she made between the human world and the older, wiser world that had adopted her as its own. The story that had begun with strange patterns in bird calls had revealed itself to be something infinitely larger. The story of consciousness itself, distributed across species but unified in purpose, creating networks of care that put human civilization to shame in their efficiency and compassion. They had witnessed not just animal intelligence but planetary wisdom, not just communication but communion, not just survival but thriving through cooperation that transcended every boundary humans had imagined between themselves and the rest of life.